Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. Today's episode is another Innovation Breakfast Club episode, where I meet with previous guests to dig deeper into one specific topic. Today's topic is innovating through teams. Please welcome back to the show, Jeff, Stephen, and Joshua. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next Breakfast Club. How are you doing? What's going on?
Good. Everything's good in Canada. How are things around the world, South Africa and America? Steve, Josh?
Hot and humid in Chicago, but really, really good. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Joshua?
To be with you guys. Yeah, good to be with you guys. It's a bit of a wintry day here in South Africa. Jens, although I'm in a t-shirt, so Jens isn't laughing at me today in my big jacket, because famous thing in South Africa is we don't have heating like Europe. So often when I meet with Jens, I'm in a big jacket, and he's saying, "Just, are you cold or something?"
It will turn around in winter for sure. Our winter.
Yeah, you guys don't know winter. Chicago knows winter.
We know winter.
Ottawa knows winter.
Ottawa knows winter. Yeah.
When it hits minus 40, where Fahrenheit and Celsius meet and collide, you can come talk to me about how cold it is. Until then, put on your jacket and, sorry, I have no empathy for you at all, Josh. I just can't do that. I'm sorry. You come up here in February and you tell me whether or not you're cold down there during your winter time, and you go out and get some firewood and come back in a few days, and we'll see how you're doing. But
that's setting the scene for today. Amazing. Good start. Good. So let's get into innovation first before we disagree again or agree. Theme of today is the importance of teams in innovation. Mm-hmm. And I would like us to explore it from top to bottom, left, right, whatever we come up with. So let's start with the kind of rapid fire, or you don't need to rapid fire, but kind of a discussion round on if you hear this, like the importance of teams in innovation, what do you think about? Let's start with Stephen first.
For me, it's about creativity, right? And giving people the space and the freedom, no matter how bizarre the idea. I have this opinion, there's no such thing as a bad idea. It's just something that you've got to work on to bring it to where it needs to be. So allowing people the space and the freedom to be creative, no matter how wacky left or right field that might be. But also allowing people that really you don't think are part of an innovation team to get involved. Because often they're the people that come out with but did you think about this? Or what about that? Or within our business, we do this, right? So I think the whole point of innovation in any business, innovation team, is it should be open to anybody.
Yeah,
good start.
It should be. I mean, ultimately, riffing on that, it's a part of creativity. Is, Stephen, to your point, is being curious, right? You have to be curious enough to reach out to other people. Just because I think the other thing that companies do and teams do is you start to put labels on titles that people have, right? Like the engineer can't possibly be creative. What are you talking about? Of course they can be, right? They look at things through a different lens, right? I gave a talk years ago in Europe talking about how your experiences in life determine your perspective, and that perspective shapes your unique reality, right? And this is why empathy and sympathy are very difficult terms to construct around. Mm-hmm. I can sympathize with you, but empathy is even a really hard thing, because even if we have the exact same experience, all of the supports we have around us, the experiences we have throughout of our life, shape our perspective on that particular reality and what we're going through at that time. So, it's really important to look at a diverse set of ideas and experiences. This is why we're looking at, even working within different cultures around the world can give you different insights into what constitutes good or creative or innovative. And I think a lot of the concerns I have around a lot of the things that are impacting the world today have to do with the speed at which we're moving. I watched an interesting talk by neurologist Daniel Levitin recently that talks about how multitasking is actually a myth. Our brains are not wired to take in the information that's coming at us, and we experience decision fatigue by the end of the day. So you can move quickly, but you have to move quickly together. And if you're not spending time to slow down, you're not getting to better ideas. You're actually making poor decisions, but your left hemisphere is really good at being confabulating the idea that you're making good decisions. So it's this constant contradiction you're working with, and especially in teams, right? Are you allowing your space, your time, yourself the time and space to listen to new ideas, or are you just pushing forward because you need to get things done rapidly, which I think is a problem, I think.
Yeah. Josh.
Yeah, Jeff, so maybe building off that, it's something that I've been thinking about most recently is around reflecting and making space to do the reflection. And I think one of the most recent articles I read was around a startup sort of ecosystem, a startup way of doing things, where you're doing things quickly and you're having to move around a lot of chess pieces on the board. But when you don't make time for reflection, you can find yourself making bad decisions. So there's a famous saying from Shane Parrish where he says that you can't influence the speed of your decision making, you can influence the quality of your decision making. And I think that that's something to think about, just basing off some of the points that you're raising. But maybe bring it back to sort of, innovating with and through teams. Is, Jens, what I really, in my thinking for this conversation, was I went back to something that you mentioned when you sent out the topic, and the word was through. And so often I think we say innovating with teams or innovating as an individual, but how is it that you innovate through teams? And Jeff, that ties and links to some of the points that you raised around cultural diversity, different environments that you're creating, and Stephen, to sort of also links into some of the points that you raised. And I think that that's really, what triggered some of my thinking in terms of how do you create an environment where you are innovating through teams and not just with teams going forward.
Yeah, to me, this all comes back to leadership. Everything comes back to leadership, right? Do people work for you, or do they work with you? Do they work through you, right? Or too many people. I've been reading blog posts for 20 years. I couldn't wrap my head around why everyone keeps talking about how to be a good leader. I'm like, how is this not common sense, right? Like, don't command and control. Don't tell people what to do. Give them direction in terms of the outcomes you want to achieve, and then let them go. Right? Give them the freedom to, but so many times, and I've experienced it recently, even going back in as an employee again. What are you doing? Why are you standing in everybody's way? Why are you not allowing people the creative freedom to actually get things done for you? Right? It's almost arrogance, to think that because of your title and where you sit, you have this ability to lead people through. Like, I can't wrap my head around why that continues, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, I love the way of thinking. Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just double clicking on the leadership part. For me, it's the leadership angle is you are a leader if the people you work with are willing to follow you. You're not a leader as a position. You're a manager who has the authority in my world due to the position, but that doesn't mean you are a good leader or a leader at all. You just have the authority, and some people are just using that and not motivating the team to do anything. But if you're a true leader, the team is deciding that you are the leader, and they're willing to follow you wherever you go.
And what do you call a leader without any followers? Just a guy going for a walk. Right? At the end of the day, that's the old joke, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have the title, and if no one respects you and is willing to follow you or get behind you, you're just going for a stroll. Right. So it doesn't.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, Stephen, you were going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to pick up on what you were saying about the people getting in the way, and the more complex a business is, the more layers there are, the more layers of management and so on. I mean, it's like trying to turn a tanker ship, right? It takes 15 miles to stop it and an hour to put it back on course. So I think when you're a smaller business, when you're a startup, like you were saying, Joshua, you've got that time to reflect. When you're kind of at that stage where you're about to make maybe the big leap from, let's say, 1 to 3 million to 3 to 10, and so you're going to bring in more people and so on, then that's when things start to slow down, and then the business is just like steamrolling through and never takes the time. It's there is either shareholders or board members or institutions that we want to see what you're doing, show us results. And then it becomes result for any sake, not for innovation, not for the better of the planet, the business, the environment, whatever it might be. It's just, we need to have a win. And that's when you don't get innovation at all. You just get people making, snap decisions or poor decisions or easy decisions. and not solving problems, but putting band-aids over them.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. People, leadership. I think leadership has nothing to do with running a business. Actually, leadership is how you inspire people and you take them with you. You know, like you say, a leader without anybody following them is just somebody going for a walk. Absolutely right. But if you can't bring people with you, when we talk about teams, people have to buy into that vision, don't they? They have to, and you have to be constantly reinforcing that vision as well. That's how you build teams. I'm a big believer in having internal and external teams as well. Like the people within the business, but then those people that aren't, can see the wood for the trees. And then, kind of, have you thought about this? Or our experience of working with other people is this. So I just think that the bigger the business, the harder it becomes. But they're the guys with the most money to be able to spend on being innovative as well, which is a complete anomaly, right? So. Yeah.
No, I know. And that's the critical thinking that I think is missing today. Like back when I started podcasting, I could never understood. And it wasn't a new thing. IBM used to do this before the information age. They'd go in, they'd charge millions of dollars. And I'm not picking on IBM. Good for them. They're making a lot of money. They're in business. But they'd people would pay them millions of dollars to give executives business strategies pre-internet. And basically the business strategy is, this is how IBM works. So follow IBM. Right. And now in this day and age, someone from Google or Shopify or Facebook or the FANG organization, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, right? They get on stage and they go, this is what we're doing. And everyone's like, oh, well, they're doing it. I'm like, okay, but you're not them. And what problem are you trying to solve? Does it even solve your problem? Are you just excited about the idea and then run off and do that? And from an entrepreneurial or an innovation perspective, to Stephen's point, right? Luke Wroblewski, the design director at Google, gave a great talk, which I can share a link to you 2 years ago, called Mind the Gap. And the gap being, the bigger the organization gets, the greater disconnect the organization has from the employees, as Stephen pointed out. And he's in charge of mobile design for Google. And it's the hardest work to do because you have to limit the number of experiences you have on a canvas that size. And then you have to sort of build out from there. But if you do that work, the experience is that much better. And yet companies still aren't innovating by focusing on mobile first, because it's the hardest work to do, but it results in the best experiences, right? So they get into something called responsive design. There's another name for responsive design. It's called graceful degradation, because you have to constantly, slowly, gracefully degrade the experience down to something far less than. So then you get to a point where you go, forget it, we'll just create an app. Right. So the bigger it gets, the more choices you have. We know from neuroscience, people can't make choices. I've done hundreds of usability studies around the world. And the more choices you put on the page, the more likely people are to jump over to things like search. Well, how's your search? Oh, it's garbage. Okay, so you sure you want to keep adding more and more to this? And to that point around adding more, as you're building your business, you got to be careful and think about the timing at which you want to start adding more and more people and growing that business, because you're going to start to lose control of that and lose sight of that experience and what it is that you're building and how you inspire people to innovate. Because as you grow your business, you also become less open to risks that a lot of businesses view as being innovative, because now it's costing you money. Now it's costing you time. To Stephen's point, you have stakeholders and shareholders that you have to account to. So do you want to grow your business to a certain point and keep going? Or do you want to hit several milestones and go, I'm done. I've had my success. It's time to sell this and or move on and do something else.
Mm-hmm. I would like to get us back towards teams.
Okay.
Because we could go so many rabbit holes already now. We need to consider doing maybe a full day live or something in the future. But let's get back to teams. So if we take everything we said until now in a perspective of how do you create teams? So if we say the limitations big organizations have with they have money, but kind of too many layers and decision problems and all these kind of things. How do you build a team that is working innovative, and how do you use that going forward? But let's start first with how do we build an innovative team, or should we even?
I think a lot of it depends, right? So if you're working with a team that already exists, which most people are, then I think it's understanding each employee, right? So people I've led, I take time to understand them in terms of their professional goals, their aspirations, also outside in their personal life. What are things they love to do that can add to that creativity? Because everybody's more than their job description. And I think it's understanding how you want to build that. And then I think from there, it's taking people, as Stephen pointed out, that aren't typically within your organization and create small teams. I've done this where you literally bring people in from marketing, comms, engineering, and you meet once a week to talk about, okay, if we were to just blow this up, I know from a platform perspective, we can't. But if the outcome for the product manager or product owner is this, what would we do? And then start brainstorming a whole bunch of different ideas. And it's not even the outcomes that we came up with once a week. It was the idea of how it started to get people out of their comfort zones and start to question other people within their teams, which in turn spawn different ideas. I think if you're hiring people, it's a lot easier because you ultimately know the goal you're trying to get towards. But that's an approach that I've taken that's helped people sort of innovate through teams, and especially within large organizations, because one person can't do it. They have to be able to sort of feed the ideas and those experiences and say, hey, you should come over and join this session we're having once a week with Jeff and his team, because they're doing some creative things that might be interesting.
Joshua, what do you think?
So I'm going to answer or reply to some of Jeff's points with a question. And the question is, when you think about innovation, a lot of companies and individuals, when they think about innovation, they'll think about it as being a cohort or a team within inside an organization. How do you rather spread that through teams? So where you have an innovation department that then sits on different teams inside teams of organizations. How do you go about creating that network effect that is then managed or fed back into your central innovation hub? And how do you then foster and build out a more broader thinking towards innovation, rather than thinking about it as just one team that is responsible for innovation or innovative thinking inside an organization?
Yeah, if there is an innovation team inside the organization, that variable, then it's about building relationships, right? It's about understanding their role and reaching out to them and inviting them to sessions and talking to them and understanding that you're interested, right? This is a value add. This isn't taking over your job. This isn't trying to say, look, I want to take what you have on, but here are some interesting ideas. Can we present them to you? And are there ways that we can sort of bring ideas to the table that allows you to move forward accordingly? And whether there's an innovation hub or not, I think, just like I was talking about before around leadership, everything in bigger organizations is about relationship building, right? Because it's too siloed. Like there's no way companies with 10,000 people in them globally, you can't possibly meet everybody. I have no idea what anyone's doing on any given day. You literally have to you have to take the initiative, right? You have to be, like I was talking about before, around curiosity. You have to be curious enough to go, oh, well, who's in charge of that? And go set up a meeting with them, get to know them. But most importantly, don't make it about you and your ideas. Make the priority to get to understand them and what they're trying to achieve, because then it otherwise just comes across as your agenda. And you have to be respectful to understand that that's not technically your job. That's their job. So understand how they work and what they're doing. And then from that, build a relationship and talk about ways in which your team might be able to involve themselves in the process. Because odds are, in my experience, a lot of those innovation teams are looking for people inside the company to help them with things they can't get help from outside the company. And if people aren't necessarily building the thing they're working on, those people outside of that can actually provide them with great insight as well.
Yeah, I love that, Jeff. And sorry, Stephen, just to double click something on what Jeff said quickly there, just around, working with inside your organization instead of potentially going outside to look for innovation or to look for different ways of thinking. Sometimes it is just really having that conversation with someone who's not in your immediate team that can offer a different perspective or a different way of thinking about a problem that you've got inside of that space. And, maybe Jens, to just double click on the point that you said, how do you go about building these innovation teams? And I think something to think about is, everyone's really excited about remote work, about these hybrid work models that we're now navigating in this information age, this remote economy. How do we go about building teams inside of that space? And there's certain research and arguments that have come out where saying remote is great. The collaboration tools that are getting us up to speed in terms of creating in-person collaboration experiences, but we're not there yet. So in the last 18 months, we've almost become super siloed, where we were maybe just siloed 18 months ago. So I think that's also something that people inside of building out innovation teams need to think about. How do you go about getting to know a person outside of their immediate role or outside of their immediate responsibility at work?
Stephen.
So there was a couple of things, I wanted to pick up on. I think there's an immense amount of FOMO around all of this as well. That in big organizations, what are they doing? What are they doing? Why aren't I involved? What's happening here? Right? I think, and I think that creates conflict within cultures as well, because unless you've got clear leadership, unless people know, you've got open lines of communication around how the business is evolving, that just creates all kinds of problems, right? But I also think that actually innovation teams within a business are more facilitators of the ideas rather than the guys that are coming up with them as well. And to both your points, Joshua and Jeff, around that yes, look, here's the guy that you need to go and talk to. We'll set that up. We'll organize that. We'll bring you guys together. So even though you have an innovation team within a business, their real responsibility, I think, is pulling all of those people together rather than actually being the creative within the organization. And we've got an innovation team, so they're the guys that are going to solve the problem. No. They're the guys that are going to help you find the solution and connect you within the business. And I think if people adopted that approach, that you would get a lot more buy-in from, like you say, if you got a 10,000 cohort across several countries, how on earth do you know who's good at what, when, and how, and so on. But if you've got that team in place, that we know that's his speciality, or we know he's passionate about that, because sometimes you don't need to be really good at something to be have that input. You just need to be passionate about it enough that your brain is open to just like spewing out the ideas, for want of a better phrase. So I think those innovation teams need to be more facilitators, and then organize, the workflow in terms of how are we producing these ideas and so on. But the other point to that, I think, is also there's the innovation of what the business does, of course, but then there's the innovation of what the business internally should be doing as well, and better processes and better systems and better HR. So I think sometimes there's a conflict with that as well, that maybe people perceive innovation teams as solving the problems that we have outside the business, rather than looking at maybe the challenges that we have internally as well. And they're different, totally different aspects, of course.
Yeah, and there's a big difference to your point, Stephen. It's important too, like all the things we've been talking about. I've talked about this as well for a long time, where companies will hum along and then they'll eventually hit a brick wall, and then they've got to push something out. And I think the biggest problem is, instead of taking the time, like the innovation team brings people together to get yourself outside of that, instead of taking the time up front to acknowledging where there might be roadblocks, problems, and thinking processes, and work towards reconciling differences and understanding where you're going. A lot of people just chug along until you have to push something out, and then everyone feels like they're compromising on what it is that how they're adding value and what they're doing. From an innovation point of view, you're basically, if you're not reconciling those differences and understanding the purpose, tying back to leadership and how you innovate through teams, no one is going to share anything with you, right? There's even studies on this around information hoarding that was done by a university in New Zealand a few years ago, around Death by 1,000 Cuts was the name of the paper, around how if you keep moving towards this idea where you're constantly just not reconciling any differences within a company, people will hide and hoard information and ideas. They won't innovate. They won't share things out publicly with other people, from a human behavioral point of view. So, it's that you have to see these things as opportunities, not just to create something new and to innovate by definition, but it's also a phenomenal opportunity to actually, bring people together and understand that you're really arguing over process. You're arguing over how. How about we argue over, or have a better understanding of, why the hell are we doing this? Because that's a lot of people's concerns in companies. Like, I've worked with learning companies who build products who don't follow any understanding of how people actually learn. What do we? Okay, well, that's fine. Maybe I'm wrong, and I was, as I learned, right? But why would you not take an initiative to understand how people learn, and then build around that, right? And there are reasons why, but once I understood that, I could actually reconcile those differences from my professional point of view and go, oh, okay, I understand the purpose of the company. I'm wrong. My intention is wrong. I need to move my team in another direction that will allow them to get things done while also providing them the opportunity to do things in a creative way.
Yeah. Love that. And I just adding my 2 cents as well. I think it's crucial to start with mindset. So when you have an existing team, like you said, is they need to have the mindset and being the facilitators, the orchestrators. If they start with that mindset instead of, hey, we're the innovators and we need to keep everything to us, it's not going to work. And that's kind of a starting point. What I did, maybe just a little nugget, when I was recruiting the last team in 2016, we looked into, should we get external innovators, like the obvious, like you mentioned before, Jeff, like, hey, there are people from Google, hey, there are people from Apple, let's bring them into our organization, they will help us to innovate. What we found out quickly before we have chosen anyone was that they will die because they are not understanding the ecosystem. If they should be the spider in the net, which is like connecting the people and connecting the dots, they can't do that because they don't know anyone. They might know the process level of how it works in Google, how it works in Apple, like you said, but they have no idea who is the real big dog, who is the person we need to convince that is convincing the other people. It's like, that's the internal company politics. These are the stuff you need to know as an innovator to say, hey, I don't run through the wall. I just talk to that person who is silent in the background because everyone is listening to that person. Then you convince one person, that person is convincing the rest of the organization.
So that leads to an interesting question, right? Like, at the end of the day, we've talked about these bigger companies and whatnot, which is interesting. But then if you really want to innovate, do you want to be part of a big company?
That's true.
I would argue no.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you defining innovation and creativity, right? Like, if you want to work for a Google and an Apple because you want that experience or you want that on your resume, great. But odds are most creatives, having been who I am one myself at my core in terms of who I am and looking at a lot of different ideas, and I don't follow A, B, C, D. That bores the hell out of me. Right. So, but it's important. I understand the rationale behind it. Don't get me wrong. I understand why the process is important. But, when it's not working over and over again, I'm like, Agile is built on a manifesto, which technically is a philosophy, not a process. So maybe we should be able to pivot a little bit more than we are, as an example. Design thinking takes too long. So why do we keep doing that with the speed at which companies want to move? So why do you work for an Apple? Like, if you really want to be innovative, maybe it's time to look at small to medium-sized companies. Maybe it's time to start your own business in that regard, right? Because to everyone's points around these bigger companies, right? Like, they're going to keep moving forward no matter what. They're going to keep shipping, right? Amazon ships code every second of every day. That's how fast they move. Every second of every day, they are shipping code. So as an example, not picking on Amazon, but right? Like, is that the kind of company you want to work in? If it is, great, good, carry on, right? But you're not going to get the chance to be truly creative. Even teams I've led and designed, they're like, well, this is what I created. I'm like, no, you didn't. Well, you might have created it, but you don't own it. The company owns everything that you do. This isn't your company.
Yeah.
And they look at me like I'm being incredibly cruel. And I'm like, no, that's not meant to be cruel. That's meant for you to be able to pull away from your work and not feel a sense like you own it. The way you get creative in bigger companies is by iterating and create a lot of different ideas that people will eventually piece together. If you want to create something that's splashy and cool and new and exciting, the odds are you're probably not going to get that at those companies.
Yeah, that it's brilliant. I love that, because it's not just how you build a team as well. You, as a member of any possible team, you choose your team, which means you choose your organization. If you're the innovator, the creative innovator, it's like you need to fit into the team, you need to fit into the organization to be happy.
Yes. And you need to be able to answer, you need to ask the right questions during the interview process to understand what you're walking into. Because if they have a whole bunch of creatives, your odds of finding joy or happiness within that company, when it's large like that, it's a crapshoot as to whether you land on a good team that allows you to do what you want to do. Do you have a good man? It is, though. I mean, at the end of the day, in my experience, it is anyway. Do you have a good leadership team? Do you have people willing to support you and guide you and allow you to do the things you want to do and grow in your own career? Or is it all about the manager and director? Right?
Let me ask you a question then, all three of you a question. So you're an innovator, you're a creator, right? And you're at a point in your career where you can go startup, corporate, medium-sized company. Where'd you go?
I don't know. Josh, where would you go?
Where would you go, Josh?
Let's throw it down south and start with in South Africa. So, Stephen, firstly, a brilliant question. And I think I've faced that very decision, when I started my working career, and that was one of the reasons why I left out and went on my own. And I think, just to give context, that was an emerging startup. So it was a do all everything type of environment, learn quickly, fail fast, and also you exposed to a number of different things. So learned a lot inside of that space. Right now, if you were to ask me, I think that I would look for a team that would support my learning aspirations in terms of what I was looking to do going forward inside of that space. And that sort of ties into something, Jeff, that you mentioned around the happiness element inside of it. And what does it actually mean? What are some of the values that you're looking for when you join a team or when you look for a place of work? And is that necessarily tied to the leaders of the environment? Do you identify with the CEO? So, for example, great leaders, an example that I'll use in my situation is CEOs who remember people's names, something as simple as that they don't actually have to remember their name, leave a marking impression on you. And what does that mean for the way that you want to become a leader in the future inside of that space? So, Stephen, to answer your question, I think it would be very contextual. It might be based on the number of people that I have inside of my network, and also what am I looking to achieve? Am I looking to achieve a situation where I'm wanting to contribute more and see what I'm contributing towards, as in see the evolution inside of a product? I think then you would be geared towards more sort of a medium-sized, maybe even a startup. If you're just comfortable with sort of learning and contributing to something that you may never see the full evolution of the end product, then you could look to go and work with like a Google or an Apple or maybe some other big tech company inside of that space.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's contextual. I started out in psychology, working in the healthcare field, in the mental health care field. I did a postgrad degree in IT. I joined a startup that built Corel's first e-learning system. I then went back to a full-time job. I went back to the nonprofit sector because of the economy in Canada at the time, worked as a manager in a nonprofit, helping the homeless find work. I then, for a year, then got a job at a Crown Corporation as the web architect, and then got let go from my year contract for over-delivering. That's another story I'll share with you some other time, which is kind of funny. And then I decided to start my own career in information architecture because Google was coming online, and I thought, everyone's problem is how do you find stuff? And that got me into podcasting, and then I did that for 15 years. I set another company up, and then my wife and I, who built the business, got tired, and we went back to work full-time. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. Do I want to start another business? Do I want to? But that experience, contextual, as Joshua said, it's also those experiences over a lifetime. We're now more focused on, what problems do I want to solve? And who are the great people that I get to work with, support, and also in a reciprocal way, learn from, right? So yeah, I think that's an individual thing. Everyone's got to be able to ask those questions. Those are really important questions, Stephen, because it's not up to the company to make you happy. Right at the end of the day, that's up to you to make those decisions. And if you don't make a good choice, it's okay. Go learn from that and move on to the next thing.
And move on to I totally agree. Yeah.
Same for me. It's really contextual. Like I would ask me right now, forget it. It's like I'm only working for myself. I can't imagine. I mean, I've been working almost 2 decades for large corporations, and large. Let's say if you consider plus 5,000 as large already, which I would, I can't even imagine going back into that world right now. Being 2 years out of that world, like never ever. But it's just the time where I say, hey, I'm just having so much fun in the process in running my own business and being my own boss and deciding whenever and whatever I do, and as well with whom I do it. That's for me the most brilliant part. Like engaging with you guys wouldn't be possible in that way in the normal world where I've been working the last 15 years.
Yeah,
and especially not this time.
Well, but to that, yeah, but yeah, exactly. But to that point, I even relaunched. I did a podcast for the first peer-written web magazine on information architecture called Boxes and Arrows, and in it there was a 2-part article written by Jeff Lash and Chris Baum, who are now product managers, I believe. Jeff Lash works for Forrester, I think, research, and Chris Baum is a design director, I believe, somewhere right now. But the article was about moving from user experience to product management, and that was 14 years ago. And one of the quotes from Guy Kawasaki was, at the time, product management is a position that has all of the responsibility and none of the power. So at the time, when I read that quote to him, I said, so why in the hell would anyone want to be a product manager? And they were both laughing. Well, 14 years later, you can start to see how product management has started to take over design decisions, ownership of the product. You can see how they've slowly started to move that whole concept back to where it is now, where it feels like everyone's in charge of the experience, right? So, I would even ask, based on that timeline and that idea, and I even asked them, I said, well, maybe I'll do another show, and would you like to come on? And to your point, Jens, about this not being possible, Jeff and Chris, rightfully so, because they're working for bigger corporations, going, well, it would depend on what we're talking about now, and I'd have to get clearance through public PR, and I'd have to get permission to talk or not talk about certain things. And that just made me, that kind of gutted me, to be honest with you, because I had such a great experience where everyone was just sharing ideas freely. But now when you work for big companies, well, yeah, if you're not representing the company well, or I have to get permission, really, you have to get permission to, and yet at the same time, these same companies are like, we're innovative and we're creative. And all of the world's online, there's 300 exabytes of information online. That's 10 with 18 zeros. So there aren't any more secrets. So the question I'd pose to all of you is, how do you even define what is innovative? Is it creating the new thing that 80% of the world adopts, like the iPhone, like the mobile phone, and just, half the world's population, I guess 4.4 billion people have a mobile device? Or is it just tweaking what's already there and having more people take it on, right? So it's almost difficult from my perspective anyway, to say what is innovative, because the company I last worked for thought they were doing incredibly innovative things. And when I heard that word and saw the Windows XP interface, respectfully, right? I'm like, no, but from my perspective, I'm like, that's not innovative. That's not creative. You're putting data into boxes. That's not remarkable in any way. So what is innovation, and does it are companies actually producing things that people find innovative, or are they just going, meh, it's one more thing that we're doing? And where is that passion? Because a big part of innovating is you have to be really passionate about what you're doing and believe in your idea.
Yeah.
And get behind it, right? So in a world where we're overwhelmed with information, how do you yourself not only get excited about it, but also convince other people to go, this is the next thing that's going to make your life better, that's going to help you do different things? I think it's an incredibly complex thing, let alone innovating through teams, because now if you're in a company or building a company, you've got to convince people you're hiring, in terms of leading them through that innovative process, that this is an exciting thing that they should be and want to be a part of, which I think is difficult, right? There's no easy answer. That's what drives me nuts about process. Oh, well, just follow Agile. Okay, but do you have enough people? Are you able to demonstrate agility by knowing that you're getting blocked at this end through validation? Do you have the agility to pivot people over to your validation teams to get things out the door? So if it's not working, why are we so hung up on process just to get things out, and at the same time saying that we're innovative and being creative? But now I'm rambling, but does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
It makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder if actually innovation scares businesses as well, and that people, like, you have an innovation team because you feel you have to have it. You don't know what they're going to do, but everybody's got one, so we probably need to get one. And then, but what are they going to do, and what are we going to innovate? And as you were saying, Jeff, what becomes innovation then? Is it a small tweak? Listen, if you go back 30 years, pre-internet, pre-anything, businesses used to have something called a suggestion box. Right? Did they not? Jeff, you're old enough to remember. So
yeah, thanks, man. That's great. Yep.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yep.
So and then you might be rewarded for that suggestion because it got taken up. The classic one for me was Morgan. A guy who'd been there less than a month, puts a suggestion box thing, leaflet in the Morgan box. It says, if you turned all the cars around 180 degrees while you're producing them, you'll get twice as many cars in the factory. We can make more vehicles, right? Innovation. So, but I wonder if innovation scares businesses, and then, like, going back to this leadership thing, I think a lot of it does come back to that. Then who's leading that? Is that something coming from the CEO and the board that says, we need to innovate? We don't know what, but let's have an innovation department and see how they get on with it. So there becomes this fear, or are we all looking for like you say, the next mobile phone, the next AI interface? You could say bots is a great innovation. I hate them to bits. I think that but somebody's going to come along and make that work a lot better, obviously. Right. So I just wonder if there's a lot of fear in it as well.
For me, all of it starts with the purpose of an organization and then the problem they want to solve. It's like for me, there's no purpose in innovating for the sake of innovating. So you don't need to have an innovation team at all. For me, no organization needs to have an organization team, like a unit that's innovating. It's more about what is the problem you want to solve. Can you do that in the existing setup you have? I can give you an example. So I was working on a topic where we completely wanted to reinvent the business model, which literally means taking the rest of the business out of business. So a new business model that takes over. If you would do this, just think about a very large organization. If you would do this and try that inside the organization, that it is visible to everyone, it's not going to fly. So that means in that case was, okay, how do we build a very, very small, we call the tiger team, that's attacking that problem and figuring out how to do that? But then if you then look into, hey, how can we solve the problems of our customers in a different way? Because everyone is part of the business, everyone should think about the customers. That means you need to then look into, how do we help everyone to do that? Getting better in solving the customer problems. So I think that's where the definition of innovation is always a hard one. I have tried to do that inside an organization. Let's define innovation for us. It took us half a year, and nobody got it afterwards still.
No. And I think that's the problem, right? Like, curiosity is now being used as a keyword more often than creativity in this day and age. There's I can't remember the name of the book. I'll share it later. But there was a creative out of Hollywood actually was talking about this and did research on it, where curiosity is now the keyword that's being used as often as creativity during the 70s and the 80s, right? So again, people and a lot of companies don't care about words on the page, but they really do matter. Like, context is the whole kingdom, right? Without meaning, you can write and publish as much as you want, but if people don't understand it, just like the idea of innovation, well, what does that mean? And there are conversations worth having. And I think there are some conversations like innovation that there isn't an endpoint for that discussion. It's an ongoing, iterative, evolving construct that you don't just go, okay, well, here's our innovation isn't your mission statement, right? It's not even a vision statement. I think it's an ongoing dialogue you have to keep having in a world that keeps shifting, where people are constantly being overwhelmed. And then, because otherwise, if you don't, then all you're doing is chasing fads. And if you're chasing fads to the end of time, well, you're never going to be able to keep up to that ever, because fads come and go all the time, and you're going to invest tons of money and you're going to lose at the end of the day. So, Airbnb actually did that at one point. The CEO, when he started, he actually had a giant whiteboard in the office. He actually put up, he asked his employees to write out what is going to be the next idea or ideas that kill our company. Like that. See, that's perfect timing. Whatever just fell down was killing Airbnb. That was the thing.
That's what's killing Airbnb. Yeah.
But that idea, right? So it actually encouraged people to come together and share ideas that, well, here's the idea that I came up with where I could compete with you and take out your company. But again, that comes back to leadership and corporate culture. So if you're a small company and you want to innovate through teams, you have to go out and talk to people and find people that are open to having different ideas, right? Just because your idea doesn't get shipped doesn't mean that the work you put in isn't worth anything. Of course not. The Stephen, I think you were talking about this earlier, like the one idea that came out that was sort of like ridiculous eventually took the conversation to the thing that created the product that people love. So there literally are no dumb ideas. There are no stupid questions, right? At the end of the day, how can I possibly know the platform if an engineer doesn't walk me through it? How can I possibly understand the customer if I'm an engineer who never talks to the customer? Right. So of course you should be asking questions all the time. And the way you innovate through teams, I think, regardless of your title, is to be asking questions that eventually get you to a point where you're modeling the behavior that, you know what, I don't know is a perfectly acceptable question, right? I don't know how this works. Aren't you curious to understand why or how we could get to a better answer? Why would you not? What's the risk in that? You learn something? Oh, well, how is that a bad thing, right? How are you doing this? It's just like usability studies. Over my career, companies get all excited about doing studies to find out where they're succeeding, but then I point out where they're failing, and they're so upset by that. And I learned early in my career to go, okay, I need to position this differently. It's not about your failing. It's about here's an opportunity to do better, right? They're not succeeding at certain tasks. That's okay. And the way I would actually mitigate that, as an example of innovating through teams, is I would actually do the tests myself without knowing the answers, write out why I came to those conclusions, and present them at the kickoff meeting. So I'm literally setting them up to say, look, here's what I think, here's where I believe they're going to fail and why, based on best practices in design and other aspects. And I could be totally wrong, just like what you've created could be totally wrong. And that's okay. I'm the thought leader you hired, and I'm probably going to get 70% of these wrong based on the feedback from other people. But that's going to be the opportunity to innovate and or make changes that are going to have a better impact on other people.
So Jeff, just to sort of take this back, and you brought it quite well back to teams and thinking about people inside of that space. How do we go about creating these environments where people feel more comfortable to go down innovation rabbit holes or to go about thinking in that way? So if I think about an example is, Seth Godin's a phenomenal thinker, and the reason I'll use him.
Well, I don't know about that, but okay.
There we go. There we go. Pushed a button, so that's a good one. So the reason why I think he's a great thinker is because he's got an ability to sort of take complex things and distill it into a few and really resonating words in terms of how he thinks about things. So I was reading a blog post where he was talking about trading problems, and inside of that he basically said, in my own words now, he says something around, if you're getting presented with new problems, it means that you're doing something right because you're moving something forward, or you're changing the way that you're doing things. So how do you go about creating a culture inside of a team to allow innovation to take place? And then that sort of links back to, Jens, what you were saying around not having a sort of a central org or a central nuclear that is responsible for innovation inside of a bigger company.
Stephen, do you have any ideas around that as I process that whole construct?
For me, I think it starts at the recruitment of the people that you want in the business, that you want to. I think I said this right at the top about giving people the opportunity to be creative, to think, to have space, right? And bringing those people in. If you bring in, somebody from Google, as Jeff was saying, that's immersed in that Google culture, it might not be a great fit because that's all they know. But if you're bringing in somebody who's passionate, who's academically a good fit, but has that creative mind, I think that's where that process starts. The more problems, and you're right, Joshua, the more problems I think you keep bringing up in the business, I think that's how you're progressing, because otherwise you just become stagnant and everything's working. So we don't need to fuss with it because it's not broken. So we don't need to fix it. We'll follow a fad because that's what's working for now, and that will give us a bump. But is that where you want your business to be? For me, I think it starts with who you bring into the business, and the amount of freedom and opportunity you give them to express anything within that business as well.
Yeah, and that's again for me. I mean, we have talked about that already quite a bit, is leadership.
Yeah.
That means you as the leader who is kind of selecting the people needs to be aware of that you need to step back. It's not about your opinion. It's not about you being in power. It's not about whatever you think. It's how do you enable the others to do it? How do you empower your organization to fix the problems for you as a totality?
Yeah.
And really having the humility, and I think that's a societal problem we have. It's like, hey, you're the leader of an organization, you're the CEO, you're a manager of a large department, whatever it is. You need to know everything. You need to be perfect. You need to be the person.
No wonder I disappoint so many people. That must be the answer right there.
That's literally, and you see that in a very, very successful organization, that people are promoted that are yes sayers. Because if you're the difficult person, and I was always a rebel, that's maybe why I ended up in innovation. I don't know. It's you're difficult for the leaders because you're questioning them, and not every leader is up for that. But I think in the times where we are in right now and going forward, things are changing so fast. So you as leader need to have the humility and saying, I have no idea how we are going forward. I have a vision. That's what you should have, at least as a leader. But I have no idea how we get there. I need you guys to figure that out with me.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I tell teams all the time. You don't work for me. You work with me. Right. At the end of the day, and there's a big difference, right? I might be accountable for the results of the team. You're responsible for certain things. I'm going to let you know, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to let you know what it's going to take. I'm going to be transparent with you in terms of business decisions when I'm part of team meetings and leadership meetings. I'm going to let you know what we can and can't do. I'm going to let you know what the company's focus is for the next quarter and for the year, if possible. So some of you are going to have things where you're going to be heads down working, and I'm going to support you. And others of you may not have things that go out the door. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not doing your job. It means I need you to support potentially the other teams and the other product, right? But at the end of the day, I'm accountable. You're responsible. I'm here for you. I got your back, right? What else are we going to do? Well, what else would you like to learn? How do you want to grow in your career? In the design world, you've got junior designer, intermediate, senior, and then manager. Well, not every creative wants to be a manager. A lot of creatives I know are brilliant at their job. They have no desire for, that title bump or anything else. And I've joked with teams in the past where they're stressing about a whole bunch of different things. And I have to look at them and go, first of all, calm down. You guys are doing great. You're all doing great. You really are doing phenomenal. Secondly, now that you've shared with me, I'm going to share with you. And then I share the shit show that's going on behind the scenes that they don't see. And then I'm like, okay, so who wants my job? And they all start laughing and they go, no. And I'm like, right. So you don't need to worry about all the other things you're hearing about. Don't listen to rumors and innuendo, right? I got your back. You're doing great. If you're having problems, let's set up times and let's talk to one another. If you want to innovate through teams, you have to build trust and confidence with people. Jens, to your point, you have to be humble, right? I don't have all the answers. I have 20 years experience in the design industry. Great. Do I have all the answers in design? No, of course I don't. I don't know what good is. The whole point behind user experience is to go out and test whether or not what I've done is good from the perspective of other people. Good is based on what's true. True is based on whether or not you can complete a task or whether you're always going to search, right? Is the product so big that you've got to bookmark pages so that you know where to go back to every time to complete things, right? So again, towards the idea of around always presenting problems like Seth Godin was talking about around, always bringing up problems. That's a good thing, but it has to be positioned in a way as an opportunity, right? Because if it's not, then all you're going to do is hit that stone wall every single time, and everyone's going to compromise on everything they think is good. And then you're just going to create a greater wedge between everybody. And if you don't get that trust and that humility built in from a leadership perspective, then, you can't even get things done. Innovation doesn't even come into the conversation, in my experience. Anyway, It's just trying to get to done every time. Right. Which is sad because there's so much potential within these companies, within these people, that you could literally do anything.
You make a great point, Jeff, about, I think, is it Simon Sinek that says, be the last in the room to speak, right? You know that you don't have the answer, but let's hear everybody's opinion, and then let's find the way through this. I'm sure there's a whole breakfast, Jens, around recruitment and HR and all of that, but for me as well, one of the things that I was taught very, very early on, before I even went out in my own in my own business was that when you're recruiting, don't recruit them for the role that you want. Recruit them for the role that you think that they want to be in down, somewhere down the line.
Yeah,
and you're right, Jeff. Some people just I just want to do this. Good salespeople don't make good managers. But what happens to good salespeople? They always get promoted to be managers, and then they end up leaving because it doesn't meet their needs. It's classic.
Sure.
That's a classic. So I think you've got to be recruiting those people that fit what you need them for, but that a year down the line, 2 years down the line, they're still going to be passionate. That they will still want to innovate because they're learning more, rather than, as you were saying, and this happens across every corporate. I'm sure the yes people that just keep getting promoted because they just follow the company line and actually don't want people to say stop. Let's look at the problem. Let's not just keep kicking it under the carpet. Let's find a solution.
Yeah, well, and there's studies too that talk about after you make so much money, I think it's like in North America, it's like $75,000. More money doesn't make you happier. It doesn't make you more passionate and whatnot. So money isn't the driving force. People will be like, well, I'm sticking around for the stock. I've got my golden handcuffs on, all these other things. No, you're not. If you're miserable, like, stop blaming the company and the people around you, right? You own your career and your life. It's not like there aren't other choices and options for you and opportunities. Start every day doing a little bit to try to find yourself a place where you can be creative and innovative, where you can share ideas and ask questions. So go ahead.
Joshua, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Jeff, just what you said there just made me think about things. And I think, you're talking about being miserable and sort of moving on from your current role that you're inside of. And something I think about when, bringing a younger perspective inside of this is when people leave an organization, often people see that as negative. But 9 times out of 10, especially when you leave an organization, think about how that person could facilitate or open doors for you outside of their current role. So if I look at myself, when I left the organization that I was with 4 years ago, there were certain people that, again, said, why are you leaving? You've got great opportunities ahead of you and things like that. But they didn't necessarily see, and some people did, and they're still very good friends, and there've been business opportunities that we've developed outside of that. But not a lot of people think about those opportunities. They see a person as leaving and they see it as totally negative. What are some of the other opportunities and those potential positive things that could come from that? And I think that also talks to team dynamics and cultures within inside organizations and how that is fostered to allow people to do their best work.
Yeah, no, 100%. And go ahead, Stephen. I'm sorry.
The happier you are in any position, right, the more productive you are. I mean, that's just human nature, because you're like you say, it's bringing you joy, right? I'm at the age where if it doesn't bring me joy, I'm not doing it, because life's too short anyway. Whether you're 58 like I am or 28 like Jens is, right? So it's got to bring you joy, and the happier you are, the more productive you're going to be. The more open your thinking is going to be, the more innovative you're potentially going to be. So creating those cultures in businesses, big, small, mahusive, right, is so important, where people can succeed and be happy.
Yeah, I agree. And Joshua, the other thing, when I was growing up back in the day, when I took my horse and buggy to school every day, uphill in the snow both ways, I'm just kidding. So being 48, in all seriousness, when I was going to school, if you didn't stay in a company for like 5 years, that was seen as a problem. Yeah. Like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, correct, Stephen? Like, I don't like, if you weren't working for a company for a long time, they're like, well, there must be something wrong with you if you can't stay in a company. Now everything's changed completely, right? People are staying in a job for 6 months to a year. And from my perspective, I look at that without being educated before. Now I understand why, in terms of career growth opportunities and other things that I didn't grow up with. So that's fine. I've taken the time to learn and understand. It's about the fact that, no, I can take on new challenges. I can learn new things. There's potentially better opportunities. There are huge upsides to do that. Whereas when I was going through the first part of my career, if I left a job after 5 years, they'd be like, well, there's something wrong with Jeff. Like, why must be a problem. The executive team must think he's an issue. Right. So again, that's like the work you're doing, Joshua, on the reverse mentorship program in Jens. It's so smart, because why are we not learning from the generation? And as I talked about a couple of years ago, if you really want to innovate and create, you should be thinking about ideas even within a company. And I propose this to people. Consider what we're building now for a future that no longer includes anybody in this room. Now take personas off the table. Forget about who your customer is, as people have talked about. The future no longer includes anyone on this call. What are we building? And why are we building it? And what are we leaving behind? And I think that's far more important than, really any other discussion. Again, it's not popular because it doesn't talk about numbers for businesses and whatnot, but it can lead to truly innovative ideas, because now you're not thinking about the world that exists now. You're considering another world, which is another generational issue, right? I can't understand the millennials and I can't understand the baby boomers because I didn't grow up in their world. I can't see the world through their eyes. So why am I not listening and learning instead of going, well, I'm stuck between the two most ignorant generations in the history of North America as a Gen Xer. And they called me slackers while the boomers killed the economy. I'm a slacker because I don't have a job. You killed the economy, you sons of, right? Like if I take that attitude, then how am I helping bring people together? I'm not. I'm just blaming everybody for everything. And instead of going, well, if you want to waste your energy on that, why don't I learn from the wisdom of the boomers and the innovative ideas and perceptions and perspectives of the millennials and Gen Zs who ultimately we're leaving the world for, right? So it just depends on how you go about doing that. And how do you innovate through teams? 5 generations coming together in the workforce. You don't think that's important? I would argue it is.
I love that. Let's take it to a conclusion. So we do a last round of what did we learn on today's call, and what would we like, or every one of us like, the listeners, to people who are watching this on YouTube, take away and maybe act on. So we start with Stephen now.
So I think you should not be scared of innovation in your business in any way, shape, or form, internally or externally. I think that you need to build that culture where there are no bad ideas, and that everybody gets to play their part in innovation, and that you have to have strong facilitators that bring the business together and point people in the right direction to build the team that solves that individual problem. So and also I learned FANG. So thank you for that, Jeff. That was a good one. But yeah, I mean, I think they're the big things. They're the big things for me.
Jeff.
Yeah, echoing what Stephen said, I think the other thing is, I think ultimately you need to model the behavior, and that's a construct that I learned back in the days of psychology. We even have things in our brain called mirror neurons, which ultimately reflect body language and how we mimic other people's behavior. By Dr. Elizabeth Gould around 2009, she came up with this information. So we have to model the behavior. If we're not seeing what we want in our organization, either through leadership or a lack of innovation, and we want more, then we need to step up. You need to take ideas, and it's not about landing the next iPhone. It's about iterating over time and slowly building people. Like your innovation plan should be a year, and the year might be over the first quarter. I'm going to try to bring 5 people together that typically don't get along or even get together or even know about each other. And I'm going to try to bring them together and just have a conversation and learn from them. So innovation should be something that's an ongoing conversation. There is no end state for it, right? Again, it's not a fad. And, at the end of the day, if you want to lead with humility. I don't care. Nobody really cares about your title, even if you do, in my experience. And the people that do are also the ones that typically, ironically, don't know. So provide them the opportunity to have those people also to have safe spaces and places to admit what they don't know, and give them the chance to see the opportunity that's in front of them. It's not an easy play, but it is one that, in my experience, is well worth investing in.
Thank you, Jeff. Joshua.
Cool. Well, I want to start off by just saying thank you to the 3 of you. It's been a fascinating conversation, and it's also just been great to, stretch my mind in terms of thinking through different things, especially when you think about teams, people, leadership, and a number of other things thrown into the melting pot today. So it's been a really great conversation. The takeaway that I'll take from the conversation today is around, Stephen, what you mentioned around the suggestion box. And I think it's something so simple that we had created and there was a process around it, but there's the digital equivalent hasn't been created. So if you think about how we can potentially collaborate more, use collective intelligence, use collective learnings to actually create and do some different thinking, I think we really need to think about how we can potentially do that inside of this digital way, inside of this information age that we're navigating. Then sort of my call to action and the inspiration is potentially to rethink the time that we need to learn things. So if I think about, and Jeff, you mentioned it in the call today, is around, we've got this huge amount of information at our fingertips. Now, in a traditional sense, we used to be very modular and siloed in the way that we moved through or progressed through things. So we needed to spend a year at a company to have this amount of experience, but you could have that same amount of experience in 6 months. And what does that mean for companies and building teams going forward, and how people have an eagerness and a hunger to learn? So how can managers and leaders rethink that time that is needed to learn things, and also use that from a people perspective to get to know people on different levels so that they can truly understand what people are trying to learn and rethink how they engage with people inside of this space.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, what do I take away? Brilliant conversation. So big thank you already from my side. For me, it's all about perspectives. It's perspective of you as an individual, selfishly. It's like, where do you want to be? In which team do you want to be? And what do you want to be? And that's for me is a starting point where for you as an individual, and then from an organizational perspective, in the same way, it's like, how do you want to bring innovation into your organism or organization? What purpose does it solve? What problem do you want to solve? And then even more important, like literally everyone mentions, the leadership you need to put in place to make it happen, because that's what you need to do as an organization. If you want to innovate, you need to put the leadership in place that empowers the employees to do it. And I think that's something I want to take away, and as well as a call to action. It's like, if you're a leader of an organization, if you're a leader inside an organization, or someone with leadership ambitions, what can you do tomorrow or even today, depending where you are in the world, listening to this, to innovate and empower the next person next to you, sitting or standing right next to you, to innovate and just get started. With that, thank you very much, guys, for the Innovation Breakfast. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I hope we can do another one. I have a couple of topics written down in case you're interested. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jeff, Josh, Jens. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any question to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on my public WhatsApp at +49 151 7033 1176. I will repeat, +49 151 7033 1176. It's all WhatsApp, texting only. Or follow me on social media and contact me there. And finally, if you look for someone educating you or your team on innovation culture coaching, have a look at heitlandinnovation.com. Thanks, and see you in the next episode.